So for today's Oud files, I wanted to do my comparison between the Oud and the guitar. It is an interesting juxtaposition because it simultaneously feels like home and confuses me a lot. And there are some specific reasons for that. Primarily, obviously, the Oud is an ancestor of the guitar. In fact, goes about 5 generations of stringed instruments back. The Oud obviously is an Arabic instrument, and it was brought, I believe, in the 6th century AD when the Moors invaded the Iberian Peninsula, so Spain and Portugal. And obviously with all of these, without the frets, you can play all these in-between notes. But in the music that we all know more broadly, we could say, all of the music is divided between 12 notes, an equal distance apart from each other. So we have a lot of chords in Western music, and that is honestly a big part of why our music sounds the way that it does. It mostly focuses on harmony. How many ways can you make notes work together simultaneously? So, chords on the Oud are very difficult to do. Because it's so easy to miss any intonation. And when it comes to playing anything that's remotely fast in your left hand, is an issue that I've come across. It doesn't mean that it's an issue with everybody, but I would assume we all kind of have this issue to an extent. It's just something to get adjusted to. And that is sliding around whatever I'm picking. So I slide just a little bit, and it's something that I'm really trying to correct and try not to do so that I can actually play more music. So it's an adjustment. However, what this instrument does allot itself to, aside from just being, an Arabic instrument that has a very characteristic sound, it can do all of those extra notes that are in between what we know is what we would call a half step if you are a musician. It's one note away on the piano. So so that, like that Turkish song that I played in Oud Files number 1, we don't have that note in Western music. Because it's not a half step, it's not a whole step, it's in between. Why it has such a characteristic sound. Now, why it sort of makes sense to me and also confuses me at the same time is the interface of the Oud versus the guitar is mostly the same. You can still do harmonics, and that's how I was able to get started, because I know that's where my 5th is. So I can use that as my basis because I know where that is on guitar. And on top of that, the ratio between the strings, the intervals that you go between, are almost identical to the guitar. You know, I have 6 strings, 5 of them are what are called courses, which is a doubled string. And between these, it is all perfect fourths, so except for one major third, which on the oud is on the 2nd and 3rd lowest strings. So I have F and I have A, right? So I can picture most things that kind of make sense. I just have to flip it, which in the part where I bring out my guitar will obviously show that. So it's an interface that I'm used to, albeit one that's a little messed up. It's like when you have a dream of a place that perhaps you've never been there before, and you don't know what it is, it's nothing recognizable, and then you see that place in real life. It's the same kind of thing of like, I know this, but I don't know this in the slightest. So those have been my kind of main struggles on the oud, the things that both make sense to me and both confuse me. So now I'm gonna jump to the guitar part. On to the guitar part. So, the guitar as an instrument is something I'm a lot more comfortable with. I have played guitar since I was about 6 years old, which for me at 19, that's roughly 13 and a half years. This is home for me. This is the thing that I probably know the best out of anything that I understand. I can never pick up a guitar, plug into my amp, turn it up, and just not smile. Partially because of the things that make it similar to the oud. So if you remember from what I just said, on the oud, all of the strings are set a perfect fourth apart from each other, minus one major third. And if you remember, I said it was between the 2nd and 3rd lowest strings where the major third lies. On guitar, it's the 2nd and 3rd highest. So on guitar, A, D, G, B, E in standard tuning. On the oud, it is C, F, A, D, G, C. So I'll just pluck, hopefully you can hear in the video. That's my lowest note in standard tuning on the oud. So it's a little bit higher on the guitar, and obviously I can go way further up. This guitar has 22 frets, so I can't, unless I bend, then I have 4 full octaves between my lowest note and my highest notes. This as an interface makes a lot more sense to me. On top of that, as you've noticed, I've played a lot more chords on this guitar, even if they're basic stuff. So the reason behind that are the frets. The frets allow you to do a lot more with the instrument to our standards in Western music. even just a simple power chord. Like sound of rock and metal and many genres. So it's that interface that allows Western music to have evolved the way that it did. So, as I mentioned, there were a few generations between the oud and the guitar. So after the Moors invaded the Iberian Peninsula, there were a few, if I remember correctly, roughly 500 to 700 years of the oud being the dominant instrument in southwestern Europe. But after a point, they realized that they wanted to be able to play with a piano and be able to do complex chords. Like, you can't really play a major 6 with ease on the oud. You know, so these things allowed for what ended up becoming the Renaissance, medieval, and Baroque lute. A lute is probably an instrument that you know, at least passively. It's in a lot of Renaissance paintings, a lot of paintings from the Baroque period. It was the most beloved instrument in Europe for roughly 500 years. And lutes are still being made today. It's where we get the name luthier, which is someone who makes either lutes or guitars or basses, someone that makes stringed instruments along the lines of what this is. That name originates with the lute. So what they did, essentially, and I can try and put a picture of a lute right here. They just took the oud and added frets. And unlike on the guitar, where the frets are metal and they are essentially dug into the fretboard, which is the wood part of everything on the top here, they're sort of pressed and kind of dug into it so they don't move. They are fixed, entirely fixed. On the lute, they were actually made of the same material as the strings, which at the time would have been gut, which is sheep intestine. And they essentially took it and wrapped it around the entire neck so that depending on, say, who you're playing with, what key you wanted to be in, you could tune individual notes so that that specific key sounds best. You don't really need that on the guitar. There's a thing of it being kind of out of tune whenever you play chords, and that's kind of inevitable. That's just part of our tuning system nowadays. But that allows every key to sound equally as good. I can play a 2-5-1 in B flat as much as I can play one in F. And it sounds virtually the same, minus obviously the range. So these are kind of the main things, and obviously I've talked about the difference between the picks. So this is normal guitar pick. They're roughly kind of a rounded triangle shape, normally kind of an isosceles kind of thing, where two sides are equal. One side is a little bit stubbier, and usually a little bit flatter as well. And that allows for you to have essentially a grip where you kind of just close your hand, close your pointer and thumb around the pick, and it gives you a stable base and not much to do. So you can, as a guitar player, you can have your fingers out. This is obviously very exaggerated. I would never play with my fingers locked like this, but you can play with your fingers out, you can play with them in, you can play with a mix of that, where, you know, I have some friends who have one finger that's in and two that are out. you can plant your fingers somewhere on the guitar to help give you some stability there. The options are essentially endless with the guitar pick. With the oud plectrum, which is called a risha, that's not quite so much the case. However, you have a lot more adjustments that you can make. So, remember, as I said, I was working most recently with the oud on trying to figure out whether I like having it just closed in all my fingers or having it over the pinky like this. So I'm still getting used to it, obviously, so I can't fully speak on the versatility of it. However, with the oud, it kind of sets itself up to be a little bit more similar, no matter who the player is. With guitar, there are so many wild ways that people play. People hold the pick differently, more extended, different fingers, different axes. But the main thing that's the same is obviously you are playing an instrument that is strung. There are 6 strings. They are all perfect fourths except for one major third. And the motion is essentially the same, where it is a rotation of your wrist. So the motion generally is a rotation, where this is exaggerated obviously, but this is the basis of my motion, wrist rotation. So it may not always look like it because of the angle of the string, but that's the basis of it. And it's essentially the same on the oud, except your wrist is kind of angled a bit more, but the rotation is still your essential motion, your essential feel thing. So in conclusion, I'm struggling but enjoying it. I think it's really good for my brain to be kind of rethinking my bases for music again. And picking up a new instrument will always kind of do that to you. Whether it's a new range, whether it's a new system, like the oud, it doesn't necessarily belong at all to Western music. And the repertoire that exists with the instrument is obviously way different. But that's not to say that it shouldn't be appreciated. Politically, obviously, the last 22 years between America and Europe and the Middle East hasn't been great. But I don't think that is reason for anyone to just assume that someone who's from a different place is not just an individual. I've seen so many people who have these built-in kind of stereotypes, stigmas around anyone who is perhaps practices Islam, anyone who comes from a country like Iraq or Syria or Yemen or Afghanistan, any of the countries that have had problems with us recently, Libya, Kenya. And it frustrates me because there's value in everybody, in every culture, and everyone has something different to offer in regards to art, in regards to science, in regards to maths, in regards to engineering, in regards to architecture, in regards to music, in regards to poetry, language. I think we collectively, not just the US, not just Europe, not just the Middle East, but collectively need to kind of learn to respect each other instead of allowing media bias and political bias to immediately consume us. I think it is much better to just ask questions, because I never would have found out about something that I'm now very, very bang into, like Arabic music, had I not just been curious. But I think it's something that we need to collectively look at and fucking stop doing. I really appreciate y'all watching and paying attention. It is really, really cool that y'all are also interested in this journey that I'm taking and this cliff that I'm jumping off of, so to speak. So, yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next Oud file.